As I mentioned, this is something that's really of right on behalf of the utility, but we want to control the placement and aesthetics to the degree that we can. And so that's what this is directed to do. I would invite your planning director, Liz Kelker, to provide more detail. And I think she's got a little presentation and background for you, along with one of our interns to sort of task you.
Yes, good evening. So yeah, I would actually, Joe, if you'd like to come up, he has a handout for everybody that we can kind of go through. Site-specific location opportunities, aesthetic opportunities, and some other relatively minor coordination issues and process issues to local governments to enact if you so choose. Really the most substantive aspects of this legislation are the governing law about placement of small cell towers is governed at the state level. And we have relatively minor opportunities to further regulate to make those facilities fit in better in our town. So I'm working on this, slaving away on this for months. I'd like to give him an opportunity to provide a little bit more information for you. Please kind of run through the document you provided.
Absolutely. So as both the mayor and Director Kelker have indicated, basically the state law that sets up the ordinance that we're trying to enact is pretty limiting on municipalities. It sets it up as a process that as long as you abide by city guidelines for a small cell facility or you do pull in the public right of way. So what this ordinance really does is, the way the state to pass the ordinance to create a permitting structure. So we already have a right of way permit system. What this does is adds another permit sort of above that, specifically for small cell facilities for 5G, basically. And what you do once you create that permit is then the city can promulgate design guidelines, which the state says that there are 4 sort of factors that you can write into your design guidelines. First, you can talk about the specific location of ground-mounted small cell facilities, the pole or the stuff that goes on the pole, the specific location of small cell facilities on existing wireless support structures and existing utility and other poles throughout the city, sort of the appearance and the concealment of these facilities, and the aesthetics of wireless support structures. Really, it's all phrased in terms of, well, at least in terms of location, more in terms of preference. You can rank preferred locations, but you really can't say no outright, because utilities can't by right build these unless they comply with guidelines. And so what the ordinance really does is it sets us up to allow us to promulgate those guidelines pretty soon, to set out our standards for the aesthetics and the support structures in these facilities. So this leg of it is pretty simple and constrained by high-rise ordinance, high-rise code. Sorry.
The only other minor details I would offer is that we have been at the same time creating those guidelines, collaborating between our service department, myself in planning. We've met with a couple of providers actually to make sure that we're doing things that are attainable within the industry, if you will. So we have guidelines that will be ready to roll out as soon as, if you prefer, go ahead and pass the ordinance, we would have guidelines ready to roll out at that time as well, along with permit and application all ready to go. So from an administrative perspective, we could carry on, as soon as the ordinance would be enacted.
Do we have any examples or descriptions of the design guidelines currently or with us this evening?
Can I interrupt just 1 sec? We have a lot of people here, and we're not everyone's facing the audience. If we could all just speak up a little bit so that everyone can hear us, please.
I apologize. I only printed one copy for my own reference, but you can look at it if you'd like.
I would-
I can also share it, leave a digital.
We
version
can
of it.
pass it around.
Pass it around, yeah, communal design guidelines.
Yeah, and then I'd like to pass it, when it gets to you, Melanie, if you would pass it through those in attendance, because I know we have some neighbors that are
Sure.
very interested in it.
I think it's also useful to point out that this ordinance is structured pretty heavily after Worthington's because they have a very similar right-of-way permit regulation system, which I offer only to say that it's, basically already a system that's working in another municipality because they've been using it for a couple of years now. So it's not as if we're reinventing the wheel or anything, at least with this ordinance.
I don't have any other questions about the ordinance. I was interested in the design guidelines. This is helpful. We'll pass that around.
How many of these, and you may not know the answer to this question, but how many of these permits, for example, has Worthington issued?
Right.
How much of these are we gonna see?
That's a good question. So we spoke to a couple of people, and they all suggest that the ideal distance between them is about 500 feet or so. They prefer a little bit less. Yeah, 300 feet, fine. No, I'm not sure how many Worthington has issued, and there is a preference among people in the industry to build their own structures, which is a whole another issue. But so it suggests that there will be a decent number. I can't give you the exact.
I just can comment a little bit on that, Ed. So we know from at least one of the folks who approached us pre-COVID that they were looking at about 30. We never got to the point of discussing with them whether 30 was going to fly or not. That was just their initial proposal or ask. Again, all that's subject to negotiation. But, the point that Joe was trying to make is that the devices themselves have to be within a certain proximity of each other because of the way that they communicate. They have to be above tree lines, to get good signals. And obviously the need is really generated by all of the various devices that consumers are using, whether it's, the refrigerators that talk to the ovens or that talk to your Nest doorbell, whatever it is. The more consumer demand there is for this, that's what's really driving the need for these small cell capabilities. So that was one vendor. Obviously, there are at least 2 major providers in the marketplace. I would assume that would, therefore exponentially multiply that number, but I would say that that's the top end rather than, the floor, because obviously this is all going to be subject to negotiation. We had one initial meeting with the mayor, Mr. Hughes. I don't think Liz was there at that time. I don't remember who else was in the meeting, but a number of people initially from Verizon to have that discussion about what they're looking for from us. And then COVID kind of put a stop to all of that.
So ultimately, though, we do have the control to limit how many.
We have the ability to discuss with them what their needs are. And, obviously they'd like them at every couple of feet if it was up to them. But, they're looking for coverage, and we're looking for something that is aesthetically pleasing, safe to the community, from a traffic standpoint, from a line of sight standpoint. Obviously, the aesthetics, we don't want these things in people's front yards or tripping people on a sidewalk, that sort of thing. So we will have, the state statute permits us to limit for those types of reasons, but we have to have really a legitimate reason for saying, no, you can't have this many, or no, you can't have them, or you say you want to have them.
Got it. How big are they? Has anybody,
So,
I have a hard
yeah.
time looking at schematics and wrapping my brain around.
Yeah, I think most of them are between 30 and 60 feet. I think 60 is on the top end.
35 to 45 is their preferred mounting for the devices. And the poles themselves, the actual pole is less or around where the light pole is. It's just the pole with this contraption here at the top.
So I will say though, one of the conversations we did have with the Verizon folks, and again, I'm just using this as an example. This isn't cast in stone or anything. I don't want anybody to sort of get married to this notion, but they did offer that, they could provide aesthetically pleasing options. They showed us pictures that they used in other towns where they will subsidize, for example, let's say we were going to use streetlights. We say we want X design of streetlight. They would provide the street light, and then they would mount their device on that same pole so that there's not extraneous poles flying around. So there are some abilities, again, to sort of double purpose some utility structures.
Correct. If they ask for a pole near where we have a light pole, we could require them to provide a combination pole. They would need to then do that in a way that would satisfy us, which would have the light on it and the banner pieces on it, and whatever else, planter hooks or whatever wanted on it. And then they would dedicate that back to the city as a city piece of infrastructure. They would generally not mount on our poles.
So these aren't retrofitted to what we already have.
They would generally not. They might in some instances, but those poles weren't designed to carry them. So they would tend to replace them in a case like that and then rededicate that infrastructure back to the city
At their cost.
at their cost.
Where does all that money come from?
My cell phone bill keeps going.
I guess that's it, those are, well, you don't have roaming fees anymore, do you? Maybe they
So-
saved them up.
Joel, really quick, reviewed the ordinance and, you know, the whereases and stuff. We can't, quote unquote, stop this. We have to,
No.
we put a framework out and we kind of give them the responsibility to fit our framework. And
Yeah, so for what it's worth, and, you know, for folks who don't have, there's a federal directive to expand broadband access. And so the need of cell phone providers or, you know, people who provide this Wi-Fi service through 5G technology has expanded. And Grandview was actually kind of the last holdout of all of the Central Ohio communities to get on board with this particular program. We were part of a lawsuit. There were 3 lawsuits brought against the state on the premise that, you know, the state should be telling the communities how to regulate this type of product and that we should be able to control our rights of way how we see fit. The lawsuits went in 2 different directions. Ultimately, the writing was on the wall that the legislature was going to proceed. And so the communities from throughout the state sat down with the various providers and negotiated what became Senate bill or House bill 478, I don't remember, House bill I think it was. And so the most that we can do in order to comply with, you know, the federal mandate and the state law is to restrict, you know, with respect to safety, aesthetics, and the other things. We really don't have the ability to say you can't come in, period. There's no city has that ability. That's been ruled on by the courts.
The closest is you can put limits on spacing. So that's effectively a limit on number, but not really. You can't say, you know, 30, that's it.
Okay.
And the example that Joe used, the Worthington example, is really a good example, not only because we've got, you know, a couple of years worth of actual practice to look at, but it's an infill city like ours, and, you know, they have the same kinds of concerns we do. Sidewalks, pedestrians, you know, business district, residential districts, and so it's a really good model to follow.
Okay, so I guess we're stuck, but we could at least use it as an opportunity to maybe beautify, and get some aesthetic benefit.
Right, and, you know, I'm aware of the concerns that were shared with council by members of the audience to some extent. I will say that, you know, conversations internally with the head of the service department, Mr. Hughes, who I think is here somewhere, maybe behind the TV screen. You know, I think you should have confidence that the people working for the city are as concerned for everyone's well-being, not just for the aesthetic, you know, aesthetically pleasing qualities of the community, but safety is a consideration. And to the extent we can control it, we will.
Any other comments from committee members, other council members?
a really quick question. Can these be retrofitted to like utility poles, or is that not? You know, this community has a lot of, obviously, almost exclusively exposed to utilities.
Right. Theoretically, though, in conversations with several representatives from the industry, they all expressed a strong preference not to do that. But that is something you could, but it doesn't seem to be something they like to do, and given the option.
Oh, can I? Sorry, I do have a question. For these design guidelines, if we were to enact this ordinance, do we then need to review and then enact the design guidelines, or is that an administrative action?
That would be administrative. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, in essence, this gives us kind of a fighting chance to set in place our police power and regulatory power as much as possible.
That is correct. Currently, we're not protected by that. The state has said that they can put these in your municipality, and we don't have any add-on protective guidelines. This will give us that tool.
Follow-up question, what is, have we researched the greatest extent to which we'll space them?
So their preference, the state limit is 300, is the biggest you can make the distance.
Okay.
Right, from there. That's the biggest minimum you can set.
Okay, thank you for
yeah.
that. Okay. Right, and Chair, do you plan on having another committee hearing?
No, I do not plan on having another committee.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? So haven't had a chance to review these yet, but I know that part of the review is around aesthetic, health, and safety, and so I assume that all those things are covered in design guidelines. Could you give us some sense of what the health and safety review through the design guidelines would be? I kind of understand. I think I have a good sense of what aesthetic would be, but just in terms of health and safety, what kinds of things would be looking at?
Sure. Well, how part of health and safety is, a requirement for a load-bearing analysis on the pole to make sure that it can support, if you're going to co-locate, right, the pole can support the new installation. In the ordinance, there's a requirement for bonding in case there's an accident, so requiring people to sort of price in the risk, which is a way of incentivizing them to be more careful. And just general sort of, basically giving the director the power to review whether the thing is being constructed carefully. And also, these installations are still subject to normal work permit requirements under the right-of-way permit process. So anytime they're actually going in and doing work, that will be bound by the existing process we have for making sure the work is being done in a safe way.
I would only add also that view triangles, when you're looking at intersections, that we would be looking at that. This is part of what Daryl is looking at when an application comes in. They might say they want one exactly here, and we would have our engineers look at those and make sure that they're not obstructing sight lines.
Anything else? Thank you for everyone who asked and answered questions. Sounds like we've had a pretty thorough review. Is this also on the agenda in the general?
There's actually one item I'd like to point out.
Sure.
Ms. Patino's on page, I don't know, it's the second to last page, or maybe it's the third to last page. There is a red line change, and that came about, I think, following the conversation that Ms. Felker and Mr. Servitowski had with one of the vendors, I believe it was AT&T. It's a change that we don't have any objection to, but I'm sorry, it's above 907.08, about 3 paragraphs up.
Oh.
So, say that again, Rena. There's 2 changes. Oh, there's 2 changes? Okay, where's the other change? On page 6. On page 6.
Letter I.
Yeah, letter I, 90703, little I.
You don't have red line versions
It's in
from
the,
us.
it's in the committee packet.
Okay.
Not the full council packet.
Just real quick.
So I just want to call those changes out too, so those amendments. can
Yeah,
be
I-
in the
okay.
Committee, in the meeting as a whole.
I noticed them when reviewing and they were not. They seem to be.
In the interest of time, we will review those.
Yeah.
You can make a recommendation.
recommend, with the caveat as this is a second reading, I think I would like to, I'm not gonna recommend approval this evening and have it get a third reading. I would like to see and learn a little bit more, even maybe just internally, about some of the design guidelines, and maybe have an opportunity to look at what Worthington has done and give the community members maybe the opportunity to take a ride up High Street or something and see if there's any more questions or ideas that might come out of that. I don't feel the need to do this after 2 readings. So while I do preliminarily recommend approval by committee, we've got a couple changes. I'd like to see a little bit more of the design guidelines. We can have a third reading just in a general meeting next month. I don't think we need to have it. I will now adjourn. I don't know what time it is. These clocks, there's like 7 different times.
7:06.
My watch says 7:06, so I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
We'll take a 5-minute recess before we start the regular council meeting. There's lots of folks here. If you wish to speak for public comment, there's these purple forms up here on this table. Please get one, fill it out, and give it to the clerk over on the side there. Leilani will make sure that you're not able to speak.
Here. Hasty. Here. Hutchinson. Here. Houston.
Here.
Panzera.
Panzera is excused.
Smith.
Here.
President Keeler.
Here.
Mayor Kearns.
Here.
Director Dvorsky.
Here.
City Attorney Kuzan.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here. Moving on
Pruitt. I live at 1227 West First Avenue, and I'm pleased to tell you I've been a Grandview resident since 1987. After a year of hibernation with COVID, it was important to me that I look at our progress toward making Grandview a more welcoming community. I was really pleased to find your August 2020 resolution that recommits us to improving the quality of life for African Americans and people of color. I am applauding your work with the schools and the library to create educational opportunities around these issues. It was a great first step. I believe, as do some others in our community, that this is a good time to look at an appropriate next step, which would be to create an ordinance that would prohibit sorting in housing. This legislation would protect people who receive Social Security, veterans benefits, disability benefits, or child support from discrimination when they attempt to rent a property in our community. Bexley and several other central Ohio communities have already passed this ordinance. We should have such an ordinance so we do not fall behind other communities in the region. We are willing and would be happy to work with council through a work group or task force to develop options to adopt a source of income ordinance for Grandview. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I think this is an important issue. We all value the attractiveness and accessibility of Grandview, and this kind of ordinance to protect people's source of income would enhance both of those things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh, thank you.
Right by that podium.
Right.
It was disposable. Oh, that's not mine, that goes.
Sorry.
All right, next we have Ms. Michelle Kozak.
Hi, Michelle Kozak, I live at 906 Copeland Road. And I want to thank everyone who came out. I think we have 18, some others who weren't able to attend. If they could please email in on this same topic that Eileen spoke about. I'm just going to say a few words about a local nonprofit called Move to Prosper that I've been doing some volunteer work since last fall with. They are in a pilot phase of 4 years. They have 10 families. It's a program that works with single moms living in poverty who have kids who are 13 and under, and they provide them a voucher and to get them to a higher opportunity neighborhood. Studies have shown that children of that age can get out of poverty by moving to higher opportunity neighborhoods where they have access to better schools. That group wants to roll out the program next year to 100 families. And as part of my volunteer work with them, I started calling landlords in Grandview in March. And I collected data on 100 apartments in Grandview. While doing this, with the source of income legislation in mind, I also started asking if they accept Section 8 vouchers. There are, of the 100 apartments, 70 that would qualify for Section 8 vouchers because there is a limit on what they pay for 1, 2, 3, and so on bedrooms. And I have found 70 of the 100 that would qualify for Section 8. But since that is we're legally allowed to discriminate against people who have that form of payment, they would not be allowed to apply to any of those apartments. And so I'm asking you to pass the source of income legislation to open that up to make our community more diverse. And also the 100 units, 48 of those are from one complex, and all 48 would qualify for the Section 8 housing. And I will continue to collect data on that to help with the Move to Prosper effort for next year. Thank you.
Michelle, what was the name of the nonprofit again? I didn't catch it.
Move to
Okay.
Prosper.org is the website.
Thank you.
And Amy Cleveland is the co-founder, and she used to run Homeport, an affordable housing nonprofit here in Columbus.
Ms. Kozak, could I ask a question? So, I'm not sure if I completely understood what you said. You talked to 100 landlords and 70 said they would accept Section 8.
Oh,
but
they're not distinct landlords. So like one place, I talked to one person who oversees 48 properties in that one. So there are 100 apartments, individual apartments. And so for an example, the threshold for Section 8 is $910 for a one-bedroom, $1,134 for a two-bedroom, and $1,428 for a three-bedroom. And so with the voucher, if the rent is any more than that, then the person holding the voucher is not eligible to apply for that apartment. Like the CMHA won't allow that. The rent has to be at that maximum or below it. So in the one building that has 48 units, there are 32 one-bedrooms that rent for $700 each, so that's below the 910 threshold. And then there are 16 units that are two bedrooms, and they rent for $800 each, below the 1134 threshold for two bedrooms.
Right, so I didn't understand the next part of your statement. You said this would allow them to discriminate. I didn't follow what you meant by that.
No, currently, the landlords are allowed to discriminate against people who have a Section 8 voucher because we don't have a source of income protection in our laws here. So if someone has that voucher, they could apply to try and get an apartment at one of these places, but the landlords are allowed to tell them no because we don't have source of income protection.
And were you able to find out from any of the people that you talked to whether they actually have turned people down or turned people away?
That is a question I will start asking in the future. I did have one landlord on my street on Copeland who told me that in the 20 years he has owned his property, he has only had one person with a voucher approach him about renting there. But I haven't asked that question, and I can. And if you have other things you'd like to know, I'm going to keep calling, so let me know and I can add on to the list of questions for them.
Yeah, I appreciate the information you shared. I'd be curious to know whether people actually have missed out on housing opportunities.
I think when I've seen data put out there, when they tell the average price of apartments in Grandview, it's very inflated. Like compared to these, they're probably including the apartments in the yard, which are much higher than the units I'm referring to. And so I think the perception is that the rents here are too high for anyone. So I don't know if that's why. Like two things, we're very white, 96.3% white here. I don't know that people of color who the majority of vouchers are held by people of color, and I don't know if they wouldn't want to come to this community because they wouldn't feel welcomed, or if there's a perception that the rents are going to be too high so that they don't approach this area.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Kozak.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on, we have Terry Eisel. Did I pronounce that right?
Nailed it, good job.
Okay. I've only seen it in print, I've never actually had to say it. So
Yeah.
you could come to the podium, please.
I'm sorry, Joe, sorry. No one, I did ask everyone if they took Section 8
Of all the apartments that are at that threshold, no one takes it. But I think, okay, Terry thought that maybe that's what you're saying, but I think you're saying how many people have been turned away. How many tenants came and they applied and they said, no, we're not going to rent to you because of Section 8. Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, everybody. I'm Terry Eisel. I live at 906 Copeland Road, and I have a couple things to talk about. The first is perspective on diversity and inclusion from young people in the community. I can kind of speak from my position as a high school soccer coach. I've coached since 1997, so I've had probably 500, 600, 700 young people who I've coached in those 23 years now. And we spend a lot of time together. It's kind of from June to November, 5-6 days a week, 2-3 hours a day. And so we talk a lot. And I like to hear what my players think about growing up in Grandview, what they like, what they wish was different. And I can tell you that without a doubt, the number one thing that bums them out, and it has since 1997, the first team that I coached, is Grandview's lack of diversity. They love that it feels like a small town. They love where it's located. They love being able to walk to places. They love Grandview Avenue. But they really, really wish that they had a chance to experience more diversity as they're growing up here. One outcome of that is I see a lot of my former players who go away to school and they realize they are really unprepared for the diversity that they experience when they leave this community and go out to larger urban areas. And they come back and they talk about what a shock it was. So I think that source of income legislation would be a good start, a first step towards improving Grandview's issues with diversity and inclusion of people who are different. I also took a look at the resolution that was passed almost a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, first week of August. And some of the sections in that resolution, I think, are pretty powerful. And I would love to see us act on some of the things that are listed in there. For example, the 7th whereas section, where it says research has shown that the neighborhood or zip code that one lives in, one's access to quality housing, clean water, etc., has a greater impact on one's health than genetics or access to care. Okay, right there, zip code, neighborhood. We are trying to find ways to improve diversity and have people who can come into this community who wouldn't otherwise be able to if they are allowed to be discriminated against based on their source of income. The 9th whereas section, the community must collectively work to dismantle this. I would love to see the community collectively work to dismantle this, and I think source of income is a good first step. A civil society, the council believes that a civil society has an obligation to work to reverse this crisis. And then the last whereas, to immediately take steps to address, fund, and support areas that strategically reduce the long-term impact of the social determinants of health for at-risk communities, including reducing and eliminating preferential treatment or practices that subject African Americans and other historically marginalized groups to increased hardships. So again, I would love to hear about the steps that were taken immediately to address those things after this was passed August 3rd. And then the last thing that I'll say is a quote from Martin Luther King, that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And I would love to see the people in this room help that arc bend a little more quickly towards justice for these populations that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eisel. Next, Amy Stevens.
Good evening. I'm Amy Stevens from 1248 Grandview Ave, and I have lived in Grandview Heights for about 10 years. And I'm here on behalf of GAIN, the Grandview Anti-Racism and Inclusion Network, which I've been involved with for the past year. And we have been looking at what are some specific policy changes that we can make here in Grandview Heights that will help to increase diversity and inclusion and signal to the broader Columbus community that we are a welcoming and inclusive community. And as we look in the area of housing, source of income protection is one area that comes up as a first step towards increasing housing affordability and therefore increasing diversity. In my day job, I look at how housing conditions and housing policy affects health outcomes, including things like infant mortality. So I'm very familiar with the affordable housing crisis that we face as a region. And we have an opportunity here in Grandview Heights to be part of the solution to that crisis. I know we're small and play a relatively small role, but this is something that we can do, a practical thing that we can do that would be helpful.
Just one data point here, in Ohio, 30% of Black renter households spend more than half of their income on housing. So just imagine what it would be like to spend more than half of your income on housing, how that doesn't leave much less for anything else. And so the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or Section 8 program, is really critical for addressing that problem, because it ensures that people don't spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And we know that source of income discrimination can be a barrier to people using those vouchers. And again, we can be maybe a small part, but we can be a part of that solution to the broader affordable housing crisis in Columbus. And just another point is that we have seen several other communities around the state implement source of income protections. Bexley has been mentioned, Westerville has also recently done this, Columbus. There are several other cities in Ohio. So we don't have to go first. We can talk to the folks in Bexley and talk to the folks in Westerville in particular and learn how they specifically crafted their policy, how the implementation is working, and we can work from the blueprints that they've already prepared. And I would be happy to talk further. We have some experts who live in our community who can talk with you more about the details of the mechanics of how to do this protection. And then once we've done source of income protection, which again, in the world of affordable housing policy is seen as a small step, a first step, but I would like us to also take a look at the broader range of things that we can do to increase affordability and income diversity in our community, things like inclusionary zoning. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Moving on, we have Aaron Cox.
Evening, everybody. My name is Aaron Cox. I live at 1067 West 2nd Avenue. I've been selected from amongst my neighbors in the east of northwest neighborhoods, which we generally define as those older streets, not necessarily the Yard, but West 2nd, Oxley, Holly, Norton, those other older streets, older neighborhood streets that are east of northwest that have some pretty heavy exposure to the development that's going on 3rd Ave. So recently there's been some proposals from developers to develop that section of town. This is the old AAA building, the old Fort and Ironworks building, some of those other buildings. And as some of these requests are coming through, they're really trying to steer the development of that into really high density urban planning that not only violates the local variants and codes for the city of Columbus, but also the planning that was done by the Fifth by Northwest Commission. So I've been selected from amongst my neighbors to come here and humbly request resources and assistance from our own city here in an effort to amplify our voices to make sure that our input is heard as this development occurs. Because we know it's going to happen. Our request is simply that they just follow code, don't ignore any variances, and have the local, broader community safety in mind. So that's really my point of being here today.
Real quick, there was a meeting last Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
How many Grandview residents showed up in opposition of that?
I think about 55. We only had 4 days. It was a holiday weekend, and there were a considerable number of people out of town. Otherwise, I think we probably would have turned out significantly more. That section of town probably has about 400 residents or so that are true Grandview citizens.
55 is pretty good.
And it was, I would say that the turnout was good given the short notice. But again, that was kind of like, we feel as though we're just a group of private citizens facing very wealthy developers. So we really don't know how to make our voice best heard, which is really why we come to you for any assistance that you might be able to offer us.
And the meeting, to be clear for anyone who's not aware, it was the Fifth by Northwest area.
Yes.
Meeting, right?
City of Columbus meeting.
City of Columbus, Fifth by Northwest.
Planning.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right. So who can I follow up with then? Ms. Gilmer. All right. Who was present, I would like to ask. So very, very appreciative of that, and Councilman Edwards too, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on,
Good evening, Steve Reynolds, 1070 Virginia Avenue. As the history buffs in the room may know, discrimination quite literally shaped the city of Grandview Heights. In the early days of our community, leaders who were seeking to exclude minorities actually drew the corporate lines so as to keep out many quote unquote undesirable people, some of whom had already settled in the area. Formal deed restrictions limiting ownership to only Caucasians were common, thus excluding blacks, Asians, and Jews. Minimum building costs were established to further hinder access. At one point, the city even prohibited people of Italian descent. Thankfully, most of those early obstacles to inclusivity are long since gone. Although sadly, as has already been pointed out, Grandview Heights remains as Central Ohio's whitest and least diverse cities. It's important to point out, though, that many of the people who previously would have been excluded from owning property or even living in Grandview have helped to shape our community into one of Central Ohio's most prestigious addresses. It's with that historical perspective in mind that I implore council and the administration to make meaningful, proactive steps towards making Grandview Heights a more welcoming place to live, work, and play. Resolution 11-2020, which was alluded to earlier, was an important statement, but much more remains to be done. A well-thought-out discussion of source of income protection would be a wonderful next step. Understandably, the health crisis has slowed many governmental functions, and the upcoming municipal building construction project will no doubt deserve a fair amount of attention and oversight. But I firmly believe that council and the administration can and should put diversity, inclusivity, and equality at the forefront of the city's actionable policy agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Last but not least, we have Mr. Gary Haydinger with 5G Tower Replacement.
Good evening, I'm Gary Heidinger. I live with my wife Renee, 1216 West First Avenue, and we've been in Grandview for almost 30 years. And last May, or April, May 2020, I was home, working from home because of COVID, and some folks were out in front of our house putting this post in the ground and a marker, and I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Well, this is the 5G tower location." And it happened to be about 50 feet, literally, from the corner of our bedroom. So I was concerned about that, about the radiation effects of the 5G tower that close to our house. Talked to Councilman Smith, and so at that point, he talked to Mr. Hughes and said the council was completely unaware of that activity, and so but this was over a year ago, and then since then we kept our finger on the pulse of this, what was happening, and then that's what led us to this planning and administration committee meeting tonight. So thanks for that, and then I want to thank the committee and council for your working on the ordinance to regulate the small cell infrastructures. And again, my concern is the safety of them and the radiation that can come from them potentially. So, and I had a brief chance, a few minutes to look through the Grandview Heights small cell design guidelines, and did recognize in there the importance of keeping them in lower density in residential areas and preferred away from that residential areas. So I strongly agree with that. And on a personal note, we have too many structures in front of our house right now. There's signs and more signs yet to be installed, and that's so aesthetically also that's something that we're personally concerned about. And finally, I would like to ask the council and committee to keep the public informed about when and where the 5G infrastructure will be placed when the time comes, so you know that. So, thank you.
Thank you. That's all the forms I received. Is there anyone else? Please come forward. We'll be brief. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to come late. My name is Bridget Newell. I live at 1070 Broadview, and I just wanted to speak in support of all of those who have been addressing this issue of inclusive housing. I think it is one step, as everyone is saying, so I'm just reiterating and reinforcing. It is one step in the direction that lines up with what you said we were going to do. I think that we all do not think that addressing only low income is a way to address race and racism, but it is one step, and it is something that we can do. And so I'm just bringing my support to this and asking you to think seriously about what we need to do, and to know that there are many of us who would help in whatever way is needed to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you everyone who came this evening. We really appreciate your input and taking the time out of your evening to join us tonight. All right, moving on, we have a presentation from Bethany Sanders. She'd like to come up to the podium. And Bethany is from the Tax Incentive Community Outreach Coordinator for the Franklin County Auditor's Office. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here, and it's been lovely to hear all the comments on the great work that you are doing on housing issues. My name is Bethany Sanders. I'm the Policy Director for the Franklin County Auditor's Office, Auditor Michael Stinciano, pinch hitting for Sam Runta, who's our Community Outreach Coordinator. And I'm here today to talk about a few things that we're excited about going on in our office, and give you an update on some new resources related to transparency and information about properties and housing here in the county. So tonight I want to talk about the TIRC Hub, which is the Tax Incentive Review Committee Hub that we've launched, and exploring that a little bit, and also remind folks about an opportunity to file some BOR complaints, which is coming up just in a little bit. Can you go to the next slide? So under Ohio law, tax incentive review committees are run every year, and the auditor serves as the statutory chair of these committees. If you could hit the present, play would make it a little bit bigger. Never should have made the suggestion.
So much for that.
I can go home.
Yeah, we have the slides in our packet.
You have the slides in your packet? Okay,
If
great.
you would like to go ahead.
We can roll with it. We'll see how it goes.
We're writing this up.
That's totally fine. So the Tax Incentive Review Councils, or TIRCs, are a combination of local leaders that review the tax incentives that are passed by local governments like yourselves. And in January of this year, we issued the first TIRC report, which is an annual summary of TIRC activity for 2020. And then just in June, we launched the Tax Incentives Hub to provide transparency and accessibility to information related to the TIRCs. As the auditor's role in incentives generally is that once an incentive is created, the auditor's office is responsible for the ongoing maintenance of that incentive on the property record. We keep the record of what properties are incentivized, have an abatement. As the property value changes, we maintain which portion of the property is subject to the abatement and which is not. Chairing the TIRC review committees, and then finally, when the end of any incentive is in place, restoring that property to the full property on the tax list. We're then going to pivot to exploring the hub, which is a visual portion. Everything I'm talking about is on our website, so for members of the audience who don't have the slides, I recommend you check it out. And so abatements are tax incentives in the form of exemptions for paying taxes on part or all of the property, almost always improvements that have been made to the property after the incentive was put in place. We deal with three different types of incentives: enterprise zones abatements, environmental protection agency abatements, and community reinvestment area, or CRA abatements. The CRAs are probably the most common around the county. Enterprise zone abatements are programs to offer companies property tax exemptions on new real property, and granted only for commercial and industrial properties. And some examples of enterprise zones around the county is the Orange Barrel Project, the Huntington National Bank facility on Cleveland Avenue, and the NetJets facility. Environmental protection abatements are property tax incentives created to encourage cleanup of brownfields in polluted areas and other environmental hazards, such as at the Lenox Flats and at the Hollywood Casino, are examples of EPA abatements around the county. These are managed almost entirely at the state level through the state EPA, but need to be reflected on our local tax rolls. And then finally for CRAs, the Community Reinvestment Area abatements, these are for property owners who make improvements, including building a totally new building or doing substantial renovations, and are broken into two types because the legislature likes to make things fun. Pre-1994 CRAs are specific geographic areas of eligibility. So you can just designate a whole chunk of land in a downtown area or similar to be maintained local business and certain historic characteristics pre-1994. And then post-1994, the CRAs need to be geared towards some sort of specific purpose. So they could be related to a corporate headquarters, for other types of economic development goals in the CRA. Many of you are probably pretty familiar with these types of programs. And for residential property within the CRA, there's a set amount that can be abated, a percentage that can be abated, and for the commercial and industrial projects, an individual agreement is reached for each property for how much will be abated, the nature of the investment, and some of the economic development, hiring, and other income goals related. So these are the type of abatements, and this is the information that we wanted to present in a transparent way so that all the residents and businesses of Franklin County can see that we're getting what we're paying for when we give these abatements, that they help reach their goal. Hence the tax incentive hub and the abatement dashboard. So I'm now on the slide that says abatements dashboard and has kind of has an image on the right-hand side. And it shows that each abatement is highlighted as like a little red dot. And the numbers on the left-hand side when you're on the screen in the abatement show the amount of funding that each of the taxing authorities would have received if the abatement was not in place. And as you zoom in and out on the map, it automatically adjusts and these numbers automatically adjust. And you can also click to select a particular municipality, particular school district, or other geographic area in the county. So you can see exactly who's giving up what and what kind of investment is coming with those funds. In addition to that, we have a TIF dashboard. TIFs, so next slide. TIFs are tax increment financing, which is a type of development tool which I'm certain you've used locally, which allows property tax money to not be just foregone, like it is with an abatement, but to be redirected towards a particular investment or development project. So it doesn't change the total amount a property owner is required to pay, but changes how it's distributed once the money is collected. Our TIF dashboard, instead of highlighting the individual projects and properties that are subject to the TIF, highlights an entire TIF area. Because in that case, it will be the entire area is TIF'd and not just the individual properties. So now you can see on the map, when you zoom in on an area, you can click on an individual TIF. And the amounts then, when you click on the TIF, the amounts on the left are the amounts of funding that each of those entities would have received if the properties were not subject to the TIF. So you can click on any shaded area for the name of the TIF, the term of the TIF, the percentage increase in value captured by the TIF, and amounts of funding the listed entities would have received if the shaded area you clicked on were no longer in the TIF. Which you know they will eventually receive, because TIFs do expire. They tend to run for even longer than abatements. Can easily be up to 30 years in a TIF project. So a couple other types of abatements that we tend to deal with in the office. These are less about community development, not related to the CRAs, but some property could just be full-on exempted from real property taxation, which partially reduces or fully eliminates the property tax. So this is a lot of nonprofit and government buildings. We do have a lot of those in Franklin County, and schools can all be subject to being exempted from property tax. And then there are just a number of carve-outs in legislation about different types of property that are not subject to property tax. A lot of different fraternal organizations, for example, have been gradually added to the tax code. The other major exemption or change in what a property can be charged in terms of property tax is CAUV, or current agricultural use value, which instead of paying taxes based on the market rate of the property, means that the property owner is being used for agricultural production, farming, and pays a rate based on what the land can reasonably be expected to produce as a commercial agricultural property. This can be really helpful, especially in developing areas, because we have decided as a state, as a matter of policy, that we want to keep land, at least some land, in farming that might otherwise be developed. But the nice thing about CAUV too is that if the land transitions from being farmed to being commercially developed, there is 3 years of recoupment. So you don't get this discounted tax rate all the way up until you sell. You do get that recoupment. And we do also have a map of the CAUV properties as part of this hub. So on the next slide, we get into the 2020 TURC data. So we can see the number of all of the different TURC commissions and the number of municipalities who are required to hold a TURC, the number of abatements by municipality, and then also an indication of the municipal population. So here in Grandview Heights, you have 3 abatements for your population of just over 8,000 people. So you can see how you compare the different municipalities all around the county. We held 20 different TURC meetings in 2020. So that is kind of the overview and the summary of the TURC Hub and some of the abatement process. I know it's really dense really quickly, but we don't like to dwell on it too much, and I mostly want to let you all know it's there so you can explore this information available to you on our website and check that out because it's interactive and fun and pretty close to live updating. So as new abatements come online, it will be reflected there. The other reminder I want to give this evening, just very briefly, is that we are coming up on a special filing period at the Board of Revision for property value complaints related to the pandemic. In this last spring, the legislature passed a special filing period that allows properties that were particularly injured by the pandemic to file a complaint to get their property value adjusted, which will result in a change of property tax. In order, the change in the property value must be based on any circumstance related to the pandemic or a state COVID-19 order, and must, quote, allege with particularity in the complaint how such a circumstance or order caused the reduction in true value of the property. And then based on that evidence presented, the Board of Revision, which is always the body that hears appeals of property tax value, will determine if a change should be made. Normally, these complaints are filed in the beginning of the year through March 31st of 2021 to challenge the 2020 value. But because this special protocol was deemed warranted, but not deemed warranted until pretty late in the game, the legislature passed it to allow us to do these fall. And these complaints run from August 3rd to September 2nd. Any property owner is eligible to file these complaints, and we always encourage people to really think about their circumstances. We have continued to see strong growth in particularly the residential real estate market and housing market, but we know that individual properties, especially some commercial and industrial properties, may have been differently affected by the pandemic. A lot of those properties are appraised on an income basis, so if there was a loss of kind of capacity to earn, we do expect to get a number of those complaints. And even if you file a prior complaint, you can come back and file this as an alternative. So we'll be hearing those a lot in the fall. So I appreciate you hanging with me in the technical issues and enjoy the slides, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the Franklin County Auditor's Office or some of these new tools that we provide.
Are the tax exemption or the tax appeals that you're talking about for COVID-related reduced in value, would those be granted like temporarily, or I mean, it would be like you would get a reduction on 1 year's worth, for example, or would it kind of start another base value and go back up?
Yeah, so the legislation deems that the value set in response to a COVID complaint should become the value for the rest of what's known as the interim period, which means the 3 years between a reappraisal or a triennial update. If something changes with the property, that would be different, but if the property just stays the same, the COVID complaint value would last until the reappraisal in 2023 here in Franklin County.
What do you mean by changes with the property? Like
If it's sold or if they have new construction,
okay,
if
knock it
that.
down and put something else up, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. And we're always around for anything you need.
Thank you for joining us. All of this for technical. All right. For anyone in the audience that was in the packet, so you can see those slides online. Moving on, we have department head reports. Carol, join us for the service department.
Hi, Mayor, members of council. I'm here tonight just to give you some updates of some of our projects and answer any questions you have. The 2021 street program, you know, has been well underway throughout the summer. We got a few items to finish up, and particularly the Elmwood sidewalk is going to go up that road up the hill to connect that sidewalk to Gazelle Boulevard.
Up.
Yeah, they're good. They had to move a water line and move gas line. There's been a lot of things there to try to get down there. They're doing coordination on the water line now. So you should see that project kick back into gear again here sometime later next week, we're hoping, to start getting in the sidewalk and there's a retaining wall that goes along there. So that should pick up. There's a few other places we're doing a little bit of paving work, patch work that's going to happen around town. For the most part, the rest of the work, the main paving and things have been completed. As you've been on Dublin Road today, you see that they are down there doing all the milling for the paving as part of the Grandview Crossing project, where they're paving all of Dublin Road basically from down to the engineer's office clear up to Grandview Avenue. It appears just coming through that they got the milling all done, paving scheduled for Thursday and Friday. So they'll do some more cleanup, get things ready tomorrow, what it looks like. Hopefully the rain holds off and we get that all finished up before the weekend. They don't come back and strike and get it finished up. They have already done the paving on the Grandview Avenue side. Traffic signals for that project. We hope the poles will be in August. There's been a scheduling of getting poles, a long time to get poles is out there. We believe hope those poles will be in and that installation will start in August. So we get all that in place and get it done. The Goodell South project, which you see at the far end of Goodell on the east side there, is moving along good. It's had a lot of utility complications in there with utilities that had to be moved, gas and phones and different things. So they ran into one issue after another, slowed it down a little bit, but they're moving along as fast as possible to get those roads, the extension of Yard, Bobcat, and then Swan down to Twin Rivers. So that's a very interesting project, and as we see it move on, you'll see a lot of improvements in that area. You already see the one building going up now, try that building. Other than that, that's kind of the main project you'll see around town at this point. We have some other smaller things going on. There's some crosswalk enhancements going on in Virginia and First. We put in a crosswalk in a couple of years ago, and there was some vision issues on being able to see these things flash. We're adding a couple of different flashers and some more signage in that area. So we're always working on those types of things. The rest of the little stuff was in the report. If you got any questions, we'd be glad to answer those out if you have anything.
Are there any questions for the director?
Nothing? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay. However, if you'd like to go, you are dismissed.
Thank you.
Moving on to the engineer, the whole crew.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, thanks for the time. I'm Matt Ferris, EP Ferris and Associates. We've been your city engineer for the past 13 years. A relationship that we cherish and have enjoyed, something we're very proud of. And looking to extend for the next 10 or maybe even 50 years, who knows. My father started our business back in '87, started in the basement of our house. I was in 8th grade at the time, so I am just under 50, if you're doing math in your head. Our first brick and mortar office was a little shoebox office on Northwest Boulevard in Grandview Heights. The building's still there today, 766 Northwest Boulevard. We were in there until '99. We grew out of that space. Now we're at 880 King Avenue, just around the corner. We have about 53 employees at this time. Over half are civil engineers and or surveyors. And they support the 5 business lines that we operate today: highway bridge design, traffic engineering, land development, land surveying, and municipal engineering. There's nothing
more boring to listen to an engineer talk, especially a nervous one. So what I've done is I've traveled, our travel team with me, and I've brought 4 more engineers here tonight to speak to you. The mayor asked us to do the engineer's report, and we will get to that. But I wanted to introduce to you some of our team members that work closely with your staff in different areas. So our senior point guard, Dave Samuelson, was going to come up. We've got our small forward, Brian Saunders. We've got our shooting guard, Jay Herskowitz. And then we've got our guy in the middle, our center, Randy Kruger. Randy is also the EP Ferris and Associates giant. So when contractors give us grief, he goes in there and bops them on the head. So he's a good ally. So Dave, if you would mind introducing yourself again and letting them know what you do.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mayor, members of council. I'm Dave Samuelson. I do traffic engineering. It's a variety of things. For example, for developments such as the Sheets development that is about to happen, I review the traffic study and then I review the plans to make sure they follow the traffic study and that they have in the plans the current city requirements. Similarly, for the south of Goodale development, same process, review the study and review the plans. But I also do a variety of studies for the city. Most recently, working with Ms. Volker on Fairview Avenue related to the school campus up on First, trying to figure out how to make Fairview extension as effective as possible. And more recently, working with Ms. Volker on the city civic center related to the fire station, its location and how best to get emergency vehicles out to their destinations. But I also do a lot of smaller studies. These would be related to residents concerned about safety at an intersection or the traffic light doesn't seem to be working right. In terms of the traffic light, I'll take a look down there, and if it's something I think I can fix easily, I'll do that. But if not, I'll tell the city that I think they need to get a contractor out there, an electrical contractor with a truck. So in a way, it's a cost savings measure to avoid them having to send out a truck with a crew that could fix something in about 2 minutes. And then last, I'd be remiss without mentioning the traffic advisory group. The last time we met seems like a long time ago, before COVID, but that's been a more, I would call that a more extensive discussion of traffic problems and how to resolve them. Thank you.
Brian?
I'm Brian Saunders. I work mostly with the street paving project and various other CIP projects in the city. So I typically will do the design for those projects and then manage the construction and the inspectors on those projects. I also do every 4 years the pavement condition rating report. So we essentially go out to all the streets in Grandview and kind of analyze the pavement and we have a rating system that we determine the condition of the pavement, and we kind of utilize that to determine which streets we repair each year for our pavement condition or for our street paving project. That's it.
He's also our social coordinator at the office.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm Randy Kruger. I manage I've been with EP Ferris since 2004. I manage our construction inspectors and also the projects that are going on in Grandview. That's pretty much it.
And then finally, Jay's going to introduce himself, and then he's going to give the engineer's report. After that, we'd be happy to answer any questions, as long as they're easy questions, like true, false, easy questions. But we're here to answer any questions if you have any.
Hi, Mayor, hi, Council. Thanks for having us here tonight. My name is Jay Herskowitz, and I've been with Ferris since 2005. And since the inception of the Grandview Yard project, my main responsibilities have been reviewing construction plans
to make sure that all site civil engineering related items meet all local and state and federal codes. Well, Dave's passion is traffic, mine's environment, so I like wastewater collection, water distribution, stormwater management. And so a lot of the plan review I do make sure that the plans meet the stormwater pollution prevention plan requirements of the city's stormwater code. And I work with Randy. Daryl mentioned all the ongoing conflicts with the South of Goodell project, and that usually results in plan revisions that I have to review. And I think we pride ourselves, Daryl and us, and we kind of have established a collaborative team working relationship with the development teams in town, and I think the result is that we get to where we need to be fairly efficiently. I've really enjoyed working with Ed Ferris, and look forward to working with Matt for another 50 years. So having said that, back in the Pat Bowman days, him and Merrick Girl had me do this monthly engineers report. So I haven't saved somewhere since 2009. And I share him with Director Dvorsky and the Fire Chief, Daryl, Charlie Beauchesne. And if the mayor or anyone else would like to be included on these monthly reports, please let me know. And so the big accomplishments of last month were, Daryl mentioned the South of Goodell project. It's kind of exciting now because they're starting to box out the streets and you can start to see the development moving forward. We work with Strouser Paving to install some water lines on 3rd Avenue. One of the things I do is kind of represent the city when we submit chlorination requests to the city of Columbus because of our water services agreement the municipality has with the city of Columbus. We basically, there's a set of guidelines we need to follow to get these water lines chlorinated. And if you think about it, ensuring that drinking water is safe is a pretty darn important thing, and so we try to do our best in that regard. Dave mentioned the Sheets project. Matt signed the plans today. I brought them over to Daryl. We have a few landscaping issues I think we're working out on the fly, and I think it's going to end where you would like it to see. The irrigation's back in the right of way, and we probably need to set a pre-construction meeting for that. I reviewed a set of plans for a new AEP storage facility on Goodell Boulevard, and I noticed a day ago I got revised plans, and I have to review the plans and make sure that our comments have been addressed, and work with Randy to provide ongoing construction inspection for the school project, the Eddington mixed-use development on 5th, Tri-W south of Goodell, and that's about all I have for you. It's been a pleasure being here tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our engineers? All right, thank you very much. I look forward to talking traffic again soon. Moving on, we have the council committee reports, finance.
No report, but I do plan on having just discussed on the past meetings, a finance meeting. I'm looking initially at the week of August 8th, but that's all subject to change. I want to send out an email to everyone, not only the committee members, but if we can get all council, and it would be pretty something that's of interest to a lot of members. So I'd like to work with you all and try and set a date for this meeting. It'll, dealing with the recovery plan, American Recovery Plan money. We're getting about a little more than $800,000 as of right now. And Director Miller can speak to this more later, but basically how we're going to be investing with that money. So just keep that in mind.
Great, thank you. Planning and administration.
Yes, our committee met this evening regarding the small cell 5G technology. While we do plan on making recommendation to approve. I would just, this is a second reading for us tonight on the main agenda, so we'll plan to discuss that further at the third reading.
Thank you. Recreation Services and Public Facilities, Mr. Kingsbury is out. Next, safety.
There has been no meeting and thereby no report for this past month.
Economic Development.
No meeting, no report.
Rules and Productivity.
I've not had a meeting, but similar to what Mr. Smith is trying to accomplish with finance, I am trying to organize a time for rules and productivity or any other council members to meet to really kind of sit down and hammer out some changes to the committee rules, which we did discuss in 2 prior rules committee meetings. Specifically, I'm waiting for Mr. Panzera to return from vacation, which he's entitled to have. So once he returns, I will exercise some due diligence in getting that committee or a work session together to accomplish that task.
Great, thank you. Grandview Library.
The Grandview Library has their planning and policy meeting tomorrow night at 6 p.m. and an exciting out of COVID jail news and music on the lawn and back Tuesdays in August from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Thank you. Schools, if you go by there, you'll see some new fencing as well, so just be mindful as you're trying to navigate around the school. Chamber. Oh, yeah. Planning Commission. And Coda.
No report.
Work C.
Yes, there was a meeting on June 10th, and Franklin County, former now Franklin County Commissioner Marilyn Brown gave some farewell remarks during that meeting. She's recently retired from her role, and also an FYI that Erica Crowley has been elected into that role, appointed, excuse me. And then this was the last fully virtual commission meeting. We'll be going back to in-person, I think, with a hybrid option in August. There's no meeting in July. That's like a normal recess month for the commission. Let's see what else. There were 3 kind of key resolutions that passed. A resolution to set maximum fee increases for the next 5 years. A resolution adopting a fee schedule for use in assessing members in 2022, and reminding folks that that fee increase was delayed during the pandemic. And then acceptance of a mid-year budget adjustment, which was for replenishing operating reserves as well as depreciation expenses for renovations as the commission office has gone through recent renovations. That's all.
Thank you. Destination Grandview.
No report.
Sustainable 2050.
Yes, so the Sustainable 2050 group met Friday, June 11th. The team shared updates to the 2021-2024 regional sustainability agenda. They had a robust set of objectives and strategies approved by the Sustainability Advisory Committee related to 4 overarching goals: to improve air quality and reduce climate change, to protect and preserve natural resources, to create equitable and sustainable communities, and to promote robust, inclusive, sustainable growth and development. I'll share that with the clerk to include in the minutes, and then that's a group that meets quarterly, so they'll meet again September 17th, and I'll come back and report back to you all.
Thank you. Traffic Advisory Group, there was no meeting or report. Moving on to Mayor's report. Mayor Kearns.
Thank you. Hope everybody had a good 4th of July. I want to thank, they left, but thanks to the city engineer and the service department for giving a quality comprehensive report just now. I felt it was important to have the engineer come to council and give some context for what they do and the broader array of city services, and the service department really touches several departments, as was stated. Talked to the council president about having to join the rotation of the department heads, so hopefully you all found that helpful, and we look forward to having them join us again. As you know, there was a water rescue at the pool, June 27th. I am deeply, have a lot of gratitude, and I want to thank all those involved, the young lifeguard who initiated it, a member of our community, the staff at Swim Safe, the manager, the bystanders, and were patrons who helped with both extracting the person out of the pool and resuscitating other guards, fire, police department, and parks department, likely a life-saving event. fire department. You all know that the police department did a survey to the community last year. That was really very successful in terms of the response and the information that was gleaned and its value to inform programs going forward. Fire department, Chief Eisenacher, has been excited about doing the same thing. So we would like to gain similar feedback on how the fire department is doing. That will be pushed out the next week or so. So for that, we look forward to that. We have several events. Summer's in full swing. Certainly a lot of children at the parks, at camps. We had a very successful community fitness day, new event, lots of fun. Upcoming events, preteen pool party this Friday, Christmas in July, and the youth triathlon. Also a reminder that the Grandview Hop's coming back, really not sponsored directly by the city, but certainly supported. So we look forward to the remaining events of summer. And you can check the website under Parks and Rec, under the services tab for the calendar. As a reminder, finally, the Recycle Right campaign is underway. We did push out the recycling carts in the community. That's in partnership with Swaco. Very pleased with how that's gone. All residences now should have received or will be receiving a magnet. If you don't have one, you can pick them up at the municipal building in the vestibule. Questions?
I can't remember how this works. How often, like, do the various department heads actually show up to meetings?
There's a rotation. We could have everybody come every meeting, but
Who's next month?
Not sure.
I would ask that we have Director Patterson come next month, or Anthony's not here, so I can't speak for him to have a recreation and public facilities meeting, but obviously we'll be getting a lot of inquiries about the pool, so I wanted to try to, he's probably the best person to answer those questions from our perspective, but and it may be better for a committee meeting, but.
Anything that you want to ask now?
What do you say?
Anything you want to bring up?
I mean, I'd like to visit the safety procedures there a little further. And we got an email today, I think everyone got it, I don't have a chance to read it, from a community member, someone who I've discussed with a lot, and I thought a lot of the ideas contained in that were useful, and I'd like to talk, get some. My impression of what's going on at the pool is anecdotal. I mean, it's like everyone else's. You're not down there. You don't see anything crazy happen. You don't think of it. But I'd like to get some ideas of, is this year really any different than others, or what we have in place down there in community. I mean, this is the number one thing I get asked about, as so. I'd like to maybe have a meeting on that where we can flush through some of those ideas as it pertains to identifying people who come in, the possibly going cashless. There's some reasons for that, besides just safety. There's a myriad of suggestions floating around out there, and I think Lauren's actually summarized a lot of that really well. I have some other ideas that maybe might be, again, better for a committee meeting. So I know we're.
I'll address just very high level. In your report was a summary both from 3 different departments, parks, police, and fire. We had some events, where the car theft that occurred early in the season, and some other calls. I think in terms of has this happened before at times, but maybe a little more often, more frequency in the first month. Following that, we did respond with increased foot patrol, regular foot patrol. We are putting surveillance measures on property. There's some now, we're going to enhance that. It takes a little time to pull online. We brought back cooler checks, and really, I don't think we've actually seen any calls for police service since then. Certainly can talk more about that. As far as the business model, there's not a recommendation right now to change that. We advertised, I think it's fair to stick with what was advertised at the beginning of the season. It was thought through over and over and over. you know, every season, I suppose, is a new opportunity to look at that anew. We did, certainly with COVID, go through many iterations and possibilities when we thought there would be a required capacity limitation or other limitations, but where we landed was really the model that we've used every other season. And so there's not a recommendation to change that this time. We obviously will do a review at the end of the season and, you know, make any recommendations. So that's just the high level.
Yeah, I'd like to say, I think the police visits were very helpful. I've been there since they've been around, and people have commented that the visibility of it is that I don't think some of the suggestions that I would be supportive of are going to really systemically change the way the pool is run. I think there is one of the reasons you could go, this is just a hypothetical, one of the reasons you go cashless is because the people have to use a credit card, or they have to use some app, allows you to know who's there. Obviously, when a past member comes, those are both residents and non-residents that come and use that, they're registered, they scan their stuff, they're there. When people come the day of, it's not, I don't believe it's logged in any fashion, and I think there's some amount of accountability when you know, okay, they know that Ryan Edwards is here, or they know that, you know, well, that's both community members and non-community members. I think that would be one of the reasons. Again, it's probably best for a committee meeting or with Mike later, but.
And I think I told you, we did look at a cashless
Yeah.
app system that would be like you buy a packet of passes, of day passes, or a one-day pass. We didn't roll that out this year. We may to go next year. And so that's a discussion. Also, as far as the police presence, I mean, I think everybody here knows, you know, the community policing is our philosophy here. The pool is a fun experience. We've had a lot of, you know, discussions about what's the right balance. And, you know, you want it to be welcoming, and seeing our officers go through and talk to people, and that's, you know, they're obviously a few minutes away if needed.
I would just say cashless, I see the value in it, however, it's discriminatory. My son does not have a cell phone, he does not have a debit card, and so if you want to send a kid down there to get into the pool, you can't. So that would not be a welcoming environment. It puts another hurdle to folks being able to enjoy our pool,
I mean, I think.
residents or non-residents.
And that is one suggestion. I mean, I think we should at least log the names of people who come in.
That's fine. I'm just saying the
yeah.
cashless.
There's multiple pools that
Yeah.
do it. Talking about welcoming, there are numerous pools in Central Ohio that do not allow non-residents, where they have to be a guest of a residence. Dublin, Bexley, apparently Canal Winchester and somebody else went that route this week because of some incidents at the places. We do allow non-residents, which we've done since, as far as I know, since I've lived here, which has been most of my life, but I don't think that that's the appropriate thing to look at right now, but I think that just the incident that I witnessed, okay, just for, again, anecdotal, of course, the people come in, they pay cash, and there's no record of who they are, and really the people who were causing the problems were gone by, like, really, they kind of just skirted out when the police showed up. And there's no record of who those people are. And it was averted because the police got here in 90 seconds, like they always do. They did their job. I mean, it's great. But something to register the presence of a person here would, I think, would really go a long way. If they know that Joe Smith or Ryan Edwards, I'm sorry to keep picking on Ryan, but you've been gone for a while, so practically a non-resident at this point. But you know, that could go a long way. And I have like a laundry list of stuff that might be better, again, to go over with Mike in a.
All right, I'm going to
Can I
assign
just
this.
second that? Just that I would like the opportunity for council to have some role, whatever venue it may be, a committee meeting, a sit-down meeting, well, it needs to be public if all of us are there, but some kind of opportunity to be a part of the conversation.
Yes, I'm going to assign this to Anthony's committee for recreation services and public facilities to follow up with some sort of pool meeting.
If I might request, I think it probably would be best towards the end of the season. But, you know, it's obviously, if the council appreciated suggestions, council members, Steve Houston.
Thank you. Moving on, Director of Operations report.
Thank you. I enjoyed the engineers report in college. All my roommates were engineers. I can't think of any of them would actually get in front of a group and actually talk out loud. So that was pretty cool. I think Jay Herskowitz said it best when they talked about the level of collaboration. In my new role, I've had occasion to work with every one of those people, and you know, they really care about giving us good service. You call them at 10 o'clock and say you need something by 2 o'clock, you'll have it. So they give us excellent service. I'm happy to work with those people. I do want to do some kudos to Daryl as well. You know, there's things you see that you can see happening around the city, and one of the things I asked for, and those folks that studied, was I wanted better signage at the corner of Goodale and Grandview for the double left turn lanes, and so they evaluated several options. You'll notice that there's stay in your lane signs on both of those. I also asked them to freshen the white lines that go across, so you know, people can notice it more, and they did that very promptly. So,
How long ago did they do
like 2 days ago.
that?
And then the other thing
Somebody said something.
I'm asking for is another left arrow sign right past the railroad tracks, because everybody shifts over trying to realizing they're not realizing until too late that they're in the wrong lane. So these folks are very good about that, so I'm really happy about that. We're also doing, in addition to the street program, we're doing additional spot repairs on streets. We're going to make a concerted effort to go through the city and fill potholes and alleys and so forth. And we, like they indicated, not only do we have condition report for streets, but we also have one for alleys. And that's an area I really think that we need to up our investment. And as always, the needs are greater than the resources, but I think that that's another area in the service department that we're going to focus on. And, you know, my job is to work with all the department heads and Director Miller on moving projects forward. So we have a good sized list of things to do. If I switch over to the Parks Department, another thing that you can visibly see is you'll notice that our parks are getting some TLC. So you notice that Wyoming Woods is starting to look really, really good. As of last week, a new basketball court down in Buck. So you're going to see, you know, all these are incremental improvements that we do as we have the fiscal wherewithal to do it. So we're happy about that. And then things that you can't see, you know, we are working on back office procedures and tools that will elevate our level of service and our ability to react to things in terms of timeliness and consistency. One of my big mantras with the department heads is consistency. You know, sometimes you do a project well, then okay, let's do it well again. I don't like the cyclical nature of things, so we're working on consistency, timeliness, for the level of service that we provide. So be happy to answer any questions. I think the department heads have done a good job of, I didn't realize how much they like to talk about their departments. It's kind of exciting. We used to get a report that it was like 2 pages long, now it's 4 or 5 pages long. And I reviewed these before you see them. Come on, please stop already. They love talking about their department, so they take great pride in their respective departments, and I'm happy to see that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the Director of Diversity? Moving on, Director of Finance, Director Miller.
Our two big things this month are the ARPA money and income taxes, as always. We did register. We have to register with the state of Ohio. They're going to pass the money through to us. I did that last week. We're hoping to send out the first tranche, they're calling it, this week or next. So I'm hoping to be in the first group that gets money. We'll get $436,000 this year. The feds are still releasing. They haven't done the final rule on how it's going to be handled, but we're starting to get communications on which federal guidelines we have to follow. We're going to have to follow their procurement guidelines, which is different than the CARES Act. There's all kinds of different things we're learning about what we need to follow as far as the federal law. We have until, we're going to have you guys approve a resolution tonight
approving the acceptance of the funds. I don't know that we were required to do that with CARES, like we were with CARES, but it's something we wanted to do and put out there and make sure that that was covered. With income tax, the state expanded the deadline for employers to withhold, or they're allowing employers to continue to withhold to primary place of employment, even if employees are working from home through the end of this year. And then at that point, if people are working from home, employers have to withhold to wherever the person is working. So if they're working 3 days in Grandview and they're working 2 days in a township, then the employer is responsible to withhold to Grandview just the 3 days, and 2 are either, if there's no tax in their municipality or they live in a township, there's no tax. So as of January 1st, all the employers have to get that straight. We have started seeing some of our employers with lower withholdings, which make us think some people may be making adjustments already, which is allowable. But we start seeing some of the effects of this. And then we'll really see it next year, I think, when we figure out who's going to be in the office. Some of our employers at Grandview Yard, I was down there this morning, and one of the garages, the one near Hofbräu House, was full. The hotel had 82% capacity today, which is great. So there is a lot of activity. They're seeing a lot of business travelers come back. So we're very hopeful that things are going to come back, but it's just going to be a huge wait and see on what happens with our income tax. So it does make us a little nervous. But so far, we've had strong net profits that have made up any differences, and we've had other businesses that are still strong. So we haven't seen in total revenues drop. Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Moore? Yes.
On the hybrid situation, so like the 3-day, 2-day thing, did you say that that is going to be required for the employer to figure that out? Or
This much to Columbus, this much to UA. So you still would have to do the same practice. It's going to be interesting.
Sounds like a barrel. All right, any other questions? No, moving on, Director Colker, Planning and Community Development.
Thank you. So one thing I wanted to mention is that our intern, Joe, his last day is next Friday. And I want to personally thank him for all the help that he's provided to me over the past several months. And also more generally, we've developing this relationship to host and benefit from both directions interns. So we'll be welcoming actually 2 additional interns starting in August. Looking forward. We already have a whole list of things for them to do, so looking forward to that. I just kind of go into my report, some highlights. Collaboration with the schools continues, both trying to get the MOU finalized, hopefully ready to bring back to you in the next month, let's say. And kicking off some of the actual preliminary engineering work with Ferris that will get us in position to apply for the OPWC grant, which is coming up in September, middle of September. And so we may ask some of you to ask some businesses or friends to write letters of support for that grant. We're really working on developing a good story, and hopefully we'll be able to get a substantial portion of that project funded. Cross all your fingers and toes. The new municipal building, predominantly, I've been interfacing with the consultant there with all the things that I've learned over the past many months, working with all of our departments to help them kind of continue to work to refine their design. We would anticipate another on-site sometime in August when everybody's kind of back in town and recovering from their summer vacations. One of the big things that we've been looking at most recently has to do with traffic, as Dave Samuelson with Ferris noted, and understanding really how the vehicles will get in and out. Regionally, both the Rapid 5 and Northwest Corridor reports or designs are done and being released. There's a public release of the Rapid 5 plans next week at the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'll encourage everybody to go. It's going to be really exciting. I got a pre-review of the one for the Sierra Corridor, and it's absolutely amazing. Let me just say, kayak shoot. It's a good thing. Joe, along with Brett, also who's been working with us a little bit on planning stuff, have been interfacing with the City of Columbus, has plans for rain gardens just to the north of us in the City of Columbus, and they've graciously allowed us to weigh in on some of their locations, so because, it's really very integrated almost with our community, so we're helping with that. And as was discussed earlier, there is in fact quite many properties that are for sale. You guys have no doubt seen on 3rd Avenue. And with all the development that has occurred around the area over the recent decade, I guess, really, 3rd Avenue in particular is ripe for redevelopment and continuing to get perhaps more so. So we have been developing a very, very collaborative relationship with the City of Columbus. They have been extremely gracious about listening to our residents and inviting them to submit comments and including those, planning to include those in their reports as projects advance through there. We're also exploring preliminarily the potential of doing a joint area plan along 3rd Avenue with the City of Columbus. We have a very preliminary meeting next week to discuss the possibility of doing that, mostly to raise issues to make it a little clearer what would be reasonable and what may be less so. So anyway, I kind of want to give a shout out to City of Columbus for the very receptive collaboration that we've had with them already and anticipate continuing with regard to that corridor. On the economic development front, we have, so among the many things Joe has been doing, he's also been working on developing a database for all of our city businesses. We had telephone contact for most of them because of their relationship with the tax office, but we're lacking email contact with many of them. So he has spent a fair bit of time calling all of them and asking for their email addresses so that we will in the future be able to more quickly and easily interface with them, ask them questions, invite them to planning events, that sort of thing. So thanks to Joe again on that. That's kind of in anticipation, at least partly, of a economic development strategic plan that Councilman Smith and Director Miller referenced a little earlier. There's been a number of inquiries with regard to mostly hospitality type businesses looking to relocate in Grandview, so it's interesting to me that industry seems to be recovering and new entrepreneurs interested in coming to town. And then just, again, we continue to help with some of the ongoing projects around town, kind of finalizing and fine-tuning some things with the Eddington development. The Eddington developer has expressed an intent to encourage the construction team there as much as possible to finish laying brick as quickly as possible. Aiming at before school starts, we'll see how quickly that can happen, but they did finally get the brick, it was a little delayed. And then also with Grandview Crossing, continuing to kind of work with that group. Grandview Crossing will be opening in the fall, so you'll see the paving getting finalized inside that development, and those roads should open sometime perhaps in October. A couple of the buildings that are in Grandview will finally be starting construction as early as next month. There's 2 smaller commercial buildings along 33 that there's been a number of businesses interested in locating in, and they are starting construction on those couple buildings. So lots of stuff going on, exciting times, and continuing to enjoy being part of it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Pope?
2 questions. The interns will they be for a full year or a couple of months?
But to the end of the year, so it's really just a couple months. Yeah,
Okay.
each gig, if
And
you will.
then, thank you. And then I know the zoning work is on your, is to come. Is
Yeah.
there just a broad framework or timeline that you can give us a sense to, or are you still sort of working that out?
Well, I'm working on balancing all the things that I would love to all do all at once.
Right,
you know?
of course, yeah.
So there's a big piece of that, trying to, keep your eye on the prize for the most important things as well as to respond to things that come up. However, that said, Joe has been helping over the past few months queue it up and get the prior effort to a point where it's more aligned, because that's actually been quite a while ago when that was started. I can't put a date on it, but it's been a good bit ago. So has brought that up to more of a contemporary, with current thinking place. And then what will need to happen is that a number of meetings will really need to be convened. Previously, the group that was working on that included both the chairs for the BZA and Planning Commission, some council members, administration, the director of building and zoning, director of planning, some realtors from the area, some homeowners and business people. So there was a really broad constituency. And when I jumped in here, I have to say, I thought, oh, I can do this. And then you kind of look at how complicated it is and how many different people have an interest and a stake in what the conversation is around those changes. So I want to say, actually, we have a presentation. Joe has pulling together a presentation. We have a meeting coming up this week to review that presents what the changes are. So like a PowerPoint that goes along with the text to present that so that we can start with a new group. And I guess, I'd like to say I'd like to start that in the fall. There's many things going on in the fall and see what the priorities are.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep, it's very helpful.
Thank you. Moving on, Suzanne, City Attorney report.
Well, I'm gonna just pile on, and Joe, as you move on to your next adventure in Washington, thank you for the work that you helped all of us with. And I think one good thing that you saw with your experience was how interdisciplinary everybody at the city really needs to be. Always with kind of eyes on the prize, making sure that the community is running at optimal capacity in terms of the services that it renders to the community. I've submitted my report and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Moving on, old business, item number 1.
Ordinance 2021-14, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into a lease agreement with the Bobcat Boosters, Inc. for use of Pierce Field Park.
Thank you. This is the second reading. Planning administration, have you met on this stuff?
I think we met time before. Did we? I don't think it was assigned to us.
Okay.
Like, I think we just left this one.
Yeah. Then, never mind. We'll read that as a second reading. Moving on, old business item number 2.
Ordinance 2021-15, an ordinance to enact Chapter 907 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Grandview Heights, entitled Small Cell Technology in the Right-of-Way.
Thank you, Councilmember Hestenos.
We did meet on this one immediately before tonight's meeting. We will defer recommendation and approval to the third reading.
Thank you. New business item number 1.
Resolution 16-2021, a resolution to accept American Rescue Plan Act funds passed through the state of Ohio from the U.S. Treasury.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith, you are the sponsor. Anything to add to this?
Correct. No, well, Director Miller touched on this. Again, as of right now, it's a little over $800,000. We get half first year, and then the other half second year. We have to procure it by 2024 and spend it all by 2026. We did something similar for the recovery plan money we got previously. So this is just to a resolution saying we approve of the funds coming in to the city. So with that, I would move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Edwards,
Yes.
Hasty,
Yep.
Hatsaputinos,
Yes.
Houston,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
President Keeler.
Yes.
Resolution 16-2021 has been approved.
Thank you. Moving on to new business item number 2.
Resolution 17-2021, a resolution authorizing the recommendation to accept the settlement plan in the class action case against Purdue Pharma LP.
Thank you. Mayor Kearns or Director Kuzan, would you like to speak on this?
Sure. Just that we are in a class to receive damages for injury caused by the opioid epidemic, specifically things like overdoses, outcomes there caused by Purdue Pharma Acts. We're in the class, I believe, because we have first responders on staff and we provide those services. I believe there's a deadline tomorrow to sign on to this.
Just most of the states have gotten on board with this, and the plan authorizes 2 classes of settlements, one for individuals and one for the suits brought by various municipalities. The collective amount was around $4.5 billion, with the states being directed to use the funds that they receive for remediation and education.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. That's a motion and a second. Carly, please call the roll.
Hasty.
Yep.
Katsipatinos.
Yes.
Houston.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Edwards.
Yes.
President Keeler.
Yes.
Resolution 17-2021 has been approved.
Thank you. Moving on to new business item number 3.
Ordinance 2021-16, an ordinance to amend section 937.05 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Grandview Heights to require owners of construction sites of 1 acre or more to adhere to best management practices for storm drainage facilities.
Thank you, Mayor Kern.
This is a recommended update to our stormwater management code and the EPA to ensure that best management practices are followed by private developers who maintain these on over 1 acre of land. Specifically, it requires a standalone operations and maintenance plan agreement with the city. It gives us an oversight and enforcement authority that we would not otherwise have, which in turn helps compliance and enhances best practices. Believe it or not, we have an even deeper bench in our engineering stable, if you will, and the expert on this was not here tonight, but we will bring the relevant team members to the committee meeting, as this is referred to committee, to really both give you an overview on the NPDES permit and the program this pertains to, as well as the specifics with this legislation, so that have a comfort level in really understanding perhaps some complexity that some of you may be familiar with, others may not. So we just ask that you keep this in mind and schedule our meeting.
Thank you. I'll assign that to planning and administration and record that as a first reading. Moving on, new business item number 4.
Ordinance 2021-17, an ordinance accepting the Ohio Department of Public Safety Training and Equipment Grant and to advance monies from the general fund to the Fire/EMS Grant Fund for the purchase of training and equipment.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith, this is your legislation.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to this?
Not really. It's, was it, more than 2,000 we're getting from the State Department of Safety, EMS grant. And again, we're transferring the amount from General Fund 101 to this fund until we eventually get it.
Thank you. And Director Miller, this is pretty much housekeeping, correct?
Yep, we do it every year.
All right. We will not assign that to the committee then. We record that as a first reading. Moving on, new business item number 5.
Ordinance 2021-18, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as parts of the various component codes of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Grandview Heights, Ohio.
Thank you. Councilmember Massachusetts. Anything to add on this legislation, Mr. Chair, or its sponsor?
I do not really at this moment.
We'll go ahead and sign that to planning and administration and record that as a first reading or first reading. Moving on, new business item number 6.
Ordinance 2021-19, an ordinance to accept the dedication of 0.086 acres of real property to create sidewalk easements and of 0.058 acres of real property to be incorporated into the public rights of way for public roadway at a development site at Grandview Avenue and Dublin Road and declaring it an emergency.
Thank you, Mayor Kearns.
Really as was described in the title, this is to delineate public access, both easement and right-of-way spaces that are needed to accomplish the development and to ensure that there's proper delineation.
Thank you. We'll assign that to planning and administration. Record that as the first reading. Moving on to other business, we have 2 liquor permits. And one is in your packet, one is as a supplemental to your packet. Both have been reviewed by the police chief and have had no objections to either of these. The first is a transfer request for Penny Beach. Penny Beach, Ohio LLC, located at 1255 Grandview Avenue. For this, we have to vote to either take action or no action. Are there any objections to the transfer?
We recommend a vote of no action.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to the second one, which is Walbert Supply House located at 1306 Grandview Avenue. Is there any objection or discussion?
Really quick, I'm going to abstain from this one only because I think my brother did work for these people a while back. I'm not 100% sure. So I'll just abstain. It's not a current hasty law client, but I think it might have been at one point.
All right.
Where is this one?
This is going to go into one of the
Okay,
shops.
Smittery.
Yeah, they're on the other side.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
Motion for no action, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Moving on, we have council comments from council members. I would just like to thank you, Joe, for all of your work. This will be your last time we probably get to see you, so I know you've been hard at work all summer, and we wish you the best of luck in all that you have to do in the future, so thank you. Also, thank you, Leilani, for trooping through our technology issues earlier today and keeping a smile on your face. We appreciate that. Are there any other comments from council members?
Just one very brief
Yes,
reminder.
Mr. Houston.
Thank you. For an event on August 26th at 7 p.m., this is the impact of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, hosted by the library and the Year of Racial Justice Learning Group. It'll be Phil Armstrong of the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission, Susan Bradford, Executive Director of the Lincoln Theater, and poet Caroline Bennett for an online discussion, and registration is with the library.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
I'm not council member, but I too would like to thank Joe. Really, I find it very energizing and rewarding to work with people who really value service and to the career public service. I think it's fantastic, and hope you've enjoyed your experience here at the city. It's unique. It's a small town in a big city, and just really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and all that you've done. Very hardworking.
Anyone else? No? All right, with that, we are adjourned at 8:57 p.m. Thank you.
6 o'clock.
Like there's a